All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. You are with us at the Colorado Restaurant and Bar Show Virtual Education Series. You're joining Cash is King, How Not to Run Out. We're going to give it just a minute here for folks to join us, and then we'll start off with Sonia Riggs, the President and CEO of the Colorado Restaurant Association, in just a moment. All right, Sonia, if you'd like to take it from here.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. As Sally Ann said, we appreciate you for joining us for our virtual series, the 2020 Colorado Restaurant and Bar Show. As Sally Ann mentioned, you see on the screen, today's series section is called Cash is King and How Not to Run Out. We created this series because we know that this pandemic has been obviously very, very difficult on the restaurant industry. And the idea behind it is if there are ways that we can get you together with other folks in the industry who are able to share some insights and help you with success or help you stay open, that's really our goal here. Today specifically, we are discussing ways to conserve funds because from what we hear from folks, from so many, that preserving cash on hand is really the secret to longevity. Today we are joined by Dave Query, the founder of Big Red F Restaurant Group, and Joe Vestrejs, one of the founders and principals of City Street Investors. Dave and Joe will lead us through ways to keep cash on hand, including exploring unusual financing options, stockpiling your grants and loans, shifting your model, and renegotiating contracts. Just a quick note here, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function in the bottom menu of your Zoom window. We will be also posting the recording of this discussion in about 24 hours in the CRB Show Education Series event app. Before we get started, also I'd like to add that over the course of the next several weeks of this education series, we'll be covering a number of topics, including creative winter outdoor dining options, additional revenue streams, social media, takeout and delivery, and more. You can join us for one session or join us for all. We're happy to have whatever works for you. Please sign up for the series on event cadence and stay tuned for more details as we develop additional programming. I do also want to note that this is off the record. This session is off the record. Again, we will be sharing it with you, but for the purposes of today, it's important that we mention that. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Dave Query to get us started. Dave?
Thanks, Sonia, and only because I'm speaking first, and I'm sure I'm beating Joe to punch on this. Thank you for all your work that you have done for all of us in the restaurant business in Colorado. You've been throwing some mad elbows and some well-placed blocking and tackling that has really helped us, all of us, to get some stuff done quickly when this first happened, and really appreciate your and the CRA's work to help navigate us through this. Thank you, Sonia. So, you know, tragic times we find us all in. There are some silver linings to this global pandemic, and for those of us committed to finding our way out the other side and being stronger and more physically intelligent, the opportunities are definitely numerous. There are changes that we've been forced to make in our business that I wish I could have been smart enough to make a year ago, and in my case, being at this for a while, decades ago. It's forced us to focus, all of us in business, to completely tear down and reanalyze and reevaluate every dollar that we spend. We've become in some ways lazy through our success, and in the way we spent and spend money, we've really ripped back into that and gotten a lot more intelligent in an effort to preserve cash. Joe has a great PowerPoint he's sharing with everyone, covering some of the topics, so I'm going to hit some others, hopefully without too much overlap. First topic for us in successfully conserving our cash and increasing our profitability has been when we reopened with tip pooling. Our labor as a percentage of sales through this tip pooling model has actually gone down, comped over last year. And in some individual restaurant cases, we've been able to drop our labor costs by 10 points, which is really hugely helpful for all of us. The biggest dollars we spend are in our labor dollars. And so carving those back a little bit has been great. At the same time, we've done some great things with our labor and our dollars, our hourly rates. All of these cost savings fall straight to the bottom line. And we've been able to create time off benefits for employees and have increased our hourly rates to kitchen employees in some cases by 30%, up to $7 an hour. It's a fluctuating number weekly, but this tip pooling model has redefined our culture and our team mentality in that where we go one, we go all, high tide floats all boats. We've really gotten back to the basics, which is sort of for us how we all started. We're all restricted as to what we can ask our employees under certain job titles and pay scales to do. Under the old tip model, for sure, this team mentality has been allowed us to ask the same of everyone. The fallout is that in some cases, we've lost some of our really high paid long-term sniper servers, which is a real tragic loss. We are all about family, and the heart and the blood of who we all are and what we all do is the people that we work with. And as a fallout, we've lost some folks. But this is a price that we're having to pay on the top level to get these hourly pay scale differences from front to back a little more normalized. Heading into winter, hustle's the name of the game for all of us. And we have to have employees in the restaurants who are willing and wanting to do everything and anything that they can to help us get through this. And that old school tip model was not working. Hey, Joe, I think there's a little bounce back on your computer. You might want to mute out. So I'll start with PPP funding. We received the PPP funds, as I hope everyone else did. We personally acted as though those funds didn't exist. Every day since March, we have acted as if each day was of paramount importance and worked each day to lower costs and expenses. We used the PPP funds for the exact purpose by law that they were created, but our ability to immediately get profitable and not rely on those funds and start spending those funds to help sustain daily operations has allowed us to head into winter with money, much needed money that we feel we're going to need in the bank. This is really, really important for all of us to hoard that cash in every case. The title of this series is Cash is King. And again, we have used these funds, as we'll all be heavily audited probably. We've used it for exactly what it was designed for. But I hope that there's another round of this funding that becomes available, and all the work that some folks, and especially some local folks, are doing with the IRC funds becomes available. But we're acting like the cavalry isn't coming, and we're preparing ourselves for that reality that this first round might be all that we get. Supreme Court nomination, a lot of distracting things that are taking people's eye off the ball on this second round, and other fundings that are going to become available. So that PPP fund has really helped us, and I strongly suggest that everybody hold on to that cash as long as possible. Looking at your P&L and cutting your expenses. When I opened our first restaurant in Gold Hill outside of Boulder in 1988, I did everything. I washed the windows, I cleaned the toilets, cleaned the carpet, stripped and finished the hardwood floors. You name it, I was doing it. And as we grew and we became more profitable and there were more people, we used that cash to hire outside services to do these jobs. And by reevaluating where we're at and what's going on, we have reintegrated this mentality that we're going to keep this work inside the house. We're going to do these jobs that we used to outsource within, and it has really turned into some substantial savings and money savings for us. For example, we have 14 restaurants. We average $3,000 a month in cleaning services. By eliminating that nightly cleaning service, we've saved $42,000 a month and $500,000 a year straight to the bottom line, and integrated that that work and those jobs back into the staff responsibility, while at the same time lowering our overall payroll. So we're asking for more work to be done. At the same time, we are seeing, due to the tip pooling, a lowering in our labor costs since we've reopened. This goes back to, in this new model, hiring people who are willing to hustle and who understand that tough times require tough asks, and that's where we're at. I'm scrubbing toilets and cleaning fryers and doing whatever it takes to be done, as I'm sure we all are on this podcast, and that's where we're at. Window cleaning, power washing, landscaping, many internet subscriptions, online services. We're looking at every single line item, every single opportunity to save money, reduce spending, and sort of hoard cash. Ghost kitchens, other opportunities, food trucks, pop-ups, wherever else we can do and whatever else we can do to increase our daily and weekly revenue. I strongly recommend that. We all have kitchens that in our minds do a certain style of food for a certain number of hours in a certain period of the day. How can we stretch the abilities of those kitchens to take on more? An Italian restaurant starts doing burgers during the day. A Mexican joint starts doing trays of lasagna at night. What can we do through the third-party delivery options to increase our ability to drive top-line revenues and help make the businesses more profitable and generate more cash? Landlords. I know Joe has a lot of thoughts on this that we'll hear from him. He and I, in both cases, are both tenants and landlords. I, throughout this thing, have not expected a single dollar of abatement. We all have leases. We all signed agreements with our landlords. I don't expect them to give me $1 off of the rent. I do expect them to be a partner with me and to help partner through this. So rent forgiveness, tacking rent on the tail end of a lease, using security deposits to maybe pay for a month's rent. Some folks have been amazing, come up with ideas that we hadn't thought of, generated partnership ideas to help alleviate some of this stress that we hadn't contemplated, and it's phenomenal. Others, not so much, but it's a tough run. These landlords have their responsibilities and their obligations and their loans and commitments to banks. So it's unreasonable for us as tenants to expect them to give us something, but I don't think it's unreasonable for us to expect and demand that they partner. Really critical. And that's a hard line that everybody has to fight. And I know it was a big one for all of us, for me particularly, having to deal with some really unreasonable landlords when all of this first went down. And one of the really critical things throughout this for us has been communication. This is the restaurant business. The coconut telephone was invented in the restaurant. When we let our staff and our employees create the narrative and start to tell the dialogue and the story because we haven't communicated with them, you're setting yourselves up for real unrest and frustration on their parts. And it's well-founded frustration. Talk to your staffs. Get with your teams, send out a newsletter, bi-monthly communication. We have 85 managers, chefs, AGMs, GMs. They are all on a morning call, email blast that shares all of the sales from the night before, labor challenges. We're all talking as a team. And it's always been the case in our business, my business. I've shared financial information. I don't protect that. I think that's a valuable tool that everybody knows where we're at. And when a restaurant's struggling or has a really shitty month, everybody feels it and knows it and tackles it. And we've got a lot of smart people working for us. So we need to rely on them for their intelligence and their intuitiveness and their ingenuity. And maybe somebody is sitting there quietly in the corner with a suggestion or an idea that might be really fabulous. And we don't have the communication and the situation where that person feels that he or she can pipe up. But it's really, really, really important. Back to this tip sharing, and then I'm going to turn it over to Joe. If we employ more often than not, the minorities that work in our restaurants in Colorado work in the kitchen. So by us creating this tip pooling scenario and the front of the house sharing tips with the back of the house and everyone working as a team, it's a real commitment on the front of the house. These folks have taken a ding to their paycheck compared to what they used to make. And those who have stayed and are a part of this commitment that we're making to the heart of the house, it's unacceptable that a dishwasher makes $14 or $15 an hour. And so we've taken a stand that no longer works for us. And the fact that the front of the house is really participating in this and owning it and feeling good about it and sharing these tips, we see a lot of collaboration. We see a lot of hustle. We see the back of the house understanding that when the cooks jump in with the dishwasher and get him or her out of the dish pit at the end of the night, that it increases their hourly rates. These hourly rates are now fluctuating on a weekly basis. The harder we work, the more hustle we have with our teams and our staff, the earlier we get out, the later we come in, the more money each individual employee makes. And it has had a huge, huge effect. But it is our commitment. And as I mentioned, it has also helped us to establish a paid time off, a sick leave fund now for 1 hour for every 30 work that gets compiled so that we can now have paid time off, which in the restaurant business for hourly employees is not something that we were ever able to do or figure out how to do, and we are now doing. So a big shout out to our CFO, Tiffany Richards, our COO, Audrey Quistorf. These two women were paramount and leading the charge in getting us into a lot of these categories of real cash evaluation and cash management, and just really tearing our business model and our operations down to figure out how we can retool and reboot and really come out of this a lot stronger. So my Sonia and the CRA folks have my email address. Anybody wants to riff on this offline or separately, please feel free to reach out to me and I'll put you in touch with smarter people than me, which there's so many of those on a daily basis. And we would be happy to jump in and help anybody out that we can. So I'm going to turn it over to Joe, a guy I've got mad respect for and have learned and talked to over the last 25 years. I think I've known Joe, and I think he's got a lot more to add to this topic.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Dave, for the kind words. I really appreciated everything you had to say about how this crisis has caused the culture in our businesses to change a little bit, and in a lot of respects for the positive. So that's one of the bright spots we can all take away from this. What I tried to do for everyone is really take a bunch of ideas and get them in one place. I will tell you, right up front, there's no silver bullet. We don't have a silver bullet to this problem, but I think that there's a whole host of things that we as operators can do to preserve our cash and to survive through what's ahead of us. Just by way of a little bit of background, our company, City Street Investors, really has sort of three lines of business. We're a real estate developer. We have a lot of projects in the Denver metro area. We also own and operate 17 of our own food and beverage outlets. And we're partners in another, I think, 5 or 6 restaurants where we are not responsible for day-to-day operations, but are just partners in the businesses. And so the information that I put together has really just been gleaned from the conversations we've had with our restaurant tenants, our retail tenants, our own general managers in our own company, and our partners. So hopefully you'll get some takeaways from this. I put together a little PowerPoint to just make it easier to get all of these ideas into one place. So I'm going to try and do a little share screen here and see if it's working. Hopefully everybody can see this up here. Right now, this is what's got, I think, everybody's attention, is that winter's coming. The the months of November, December, January, February are going to be tough months. A lot of us have obviously big expanded patios that are probably not going to be as profitable for us in these cold months. You know, it's great that it's gotten extended to October of next year, which is really fantastic. But I think there's still going to be some resistance to eating indoors in enclosed environments. And I think there's a chance that we're going to experience reduced sales compared to what we have been enjoying over the summer months. So let's see if I can get this to advance. Okay, so here's some, I just kind of broke this out into 7 areas to consider. Holding cost, rent, debt structures, your operating hours, labor cost, pay structures, some menu engineering, add-on fees, and some promotional tactics. And again, none of these are silver bullets, but I think collectively, employing a lot of these ideas can go a long way towards survival. You know, and while we're on the topic of survival, I think that one of the things that all of us need to decide is that we are in fact going to survive. There are some restaurants that have closed already that I know of, and some partners that I've you know, talked to that are feeling like they want to throw in the towel. Like, this is hard, and it's been hard, and it's going to continue to be hard for a while. And so early on, you've got to really just dig deep down inside and say, we are going to survive. We're going to take the steps we need to. We're going to work harder. We're going to work smarter. We're going to pull our team together, and we are not going to be casualty of this crisis. So one of the first things I ask all of our partners, all of our general managers to do is, what's your holding cost? I think it's really important to understand, if I ceased operating today, you know, what would it cost me to just hold this business? That's an important thing to know, because as you move forward and as you're trying to conserve your cash and to make smart decisions, you've got to be able to compare it to whatever this cost is. I will tell you that we have suspended operations at one of our 17 establishments because we could not get past the cost of operating was greater than the holding cost. And so we've made the tough decision to just say, you know, we've got to conserve cash. So one of these operations is going to be mothballed over the course of the winter. We'll talk a little bit more about this later. I'm a landlord. We're primarily in the real estate business, so I thought I would take I thought I'd start out with talking about this important topic, rent and debt. As Dave said, your landlord is your partner. There's just no two ways about that. We believe it really, really strongly that we want to partner with our tenants. But we really feel the same way about our lenders and our vendors and any investors that we have as well. We're all partners in this, and we all have to be working together in order to get through it. I want to get this right out there. You need to be completely transparent with information with all of your partners, your lenders, your landlords. They're going to want to know, you know, what your P&L looks like, what your payroll looks like. If a tenant comes to me and says, I really want you to reduce my rent, or I want you to convert my rent, you know, we're going to have reasonable questions to ask about who's getting paid what, how are you actually doing financially, what does your balance sheet look like? We need to understand this in order to make a fair and equitable decision. I will tell you that almost all landlords understand that rent is ultimately a function of sales. So, you know, you can't, if your occupancy cost is 20% of your sales, you're simply not going to succeed. There's no chance. Landlords understand that. We have converted some of our tenants to a percentage rent structure. Not all. A lot of them are just paying their rent or able to pay their rent. But for those who have struggled a little bit, we have shifted to percentage rent, typically around 10%, so that we're really tying their occupancy costs to their sales. It allows their rent to rise when their sales rise, their rent falls when their sales fall. Again, this is not a cure-all, but it can really help. Landlords may be willing to invest in sales building investments like patio enclosures, tents, and heaters, we actually are partners in a project with another landlord where we don't have any of our own operations, but our partners do. And that landlord has agreed to help out our tenants with the cost of their tents, and we're adding furnaces for the winter and these kinds of things. And the landlord is actually helping pay for that, mainly because we're on a percentage rent deal. Because once you shift to that percentage rent deal, then every dollar that comes in part belongs to the landlord. It gives the landlord an incentive to invest. You can ask for deferments in exchange for higher rents later or extension of lease term. Dave mentioned that. Maybe you need a break in January or February, and you can add that on to the end of the lease, or maybe you pay a little bit higher rent when the summer months come again. If you are carrying a large balance with a vendor, you might consider asking the vendor to take that balance and put it into a note that you can spread out over a longer term. Maybe payments resume in the spring. I think the point of all this is that you really have to meet with everybody, treat them as your partners, and find solutions for each of these issues. Ask your lender for payment forbearance, which is let's skip some payments for a while, or maybe you shift to interest-only payments if you have an amortizing debt payment. Make sure you know about every support program available to you. Talk to your city's economic development manager. I've been amazed at there haven't been that many programs in Denver proper, but a lot of the suburbs have had really nice little programs. Thornton and North Glen and Westminster have actually had grants out there, $5,000 and $10,000, $15,000. Very simple application processes that go a long way towards giving you a little bit of extra operating cash to help you get through this. Consider subleasing your kitchen for certain hours or part of your space to generate additional income. So yeah, you can do you can do your own ghost kitchen, but you could also think about leasing out your kitchen to somebody else completely and just collecting rent. We're actually doing this in one location. We have an operation that's only open for dinner. So during the day, someone else can use it to do prep, or maybe to supply their food truck or their bakery operation that they're doing part-time. You just got to be entrepreneurial, you got to be creative, and you got to look for opportunities. This reactiveio.io is a local company that is basically a clearinghouse for sublease space. So if you're closed during the day or you're closed at night, whatever the case may be, you can list your space with Reactive, and if somebody needs it for a photo shoot or for some kind of a meeting or something like that, you can generate some income there as well. We have another building where we had a huge office in it that we really weren't using at all anymore. And so we sort of redid it a little bit and leased it out for $1,000 a month. It was a big win for that little restaurant to be able to add that income. So again, really be entrepreneurial, be creative with reducing your overhead expenses. Temporary closure, change to takeout and delivery only may be strategic in certain circumstances, but you got to remember the reopening expense. This is a really tough one. I have talked, not to any of our operations, but a couple of folks whose names you know who are thinking winter months they may very well shift back to delivery and takeout only because their operations are small and the current restrictions, if it gets too cold to really use patios, they think it may be more profitable for them to reduce back down to a skeleton crew and just do takeout and delivery, that it's just going to be too hard to really operate dine-in all winter long. That's a big decision, but you need to study the cost of that next to your holding costs and really make sure that you're making the right decision to stay open for dine-in or make the right decision to close for takeout and delivery. I know that when we were operating those first 2 months of takeout and delivery in April and May, it actually was pretty profitable. We had such a small crew staying so busy under limited operating hours that it actually made for a profitable operation. It has to be evaluated, so you need to take time to really do the numbers on those and make sure that you understand them. If you have investors, involve them in all of your decision making. And you can even consider diluting your ownership in exchange for additional funding. I know somebody who just did this. They traded about 10% of ownership in exchange for some additional cash. Also might be an opportunity to improve your terms. Another deal that we're in that had a preferred rate of return to the investors of 10%, the investors agreed to suspend their preferred return for the duration of the crisis. So make sure you're examining every aspect of your business and looking for opportunities to either raise cash or to reduce your monthly expenses. Operating hours. I think this is a tough one that goes back to math. One of the rules that we've made for all of our operation is that if we can't operate in the black, we're not open. So this wasn't always the case pre-pandemic, you know, that you wanted to be open to serve your guests and even when it may not have been profitable. But if you're in the mode of preserving cash at all costs, if you cannot operate profitably on a Monday night or a Tuesday night, you ought not to be open. You need to be really aggressive in setting the correct hours of operation and controlling times in and times out for your staff. Only be open when you're 100% certain that sales are sufficient to support your labor costs. You know, the quick math on this is figure out what your minimum required staff to operate is, divide it by 30%, and that's going to give you the sales required to justify opening. I don't think that operating with labor costs of 40 and 50% makes any sense. But I think each operation needs to know these numbers and make good decisions about whether or not they should be open. You know, trying to keep your prime cost, your labor cost and your products cost, you know, below 60% is essential if you're gonna operate in the black and not absorb your cash reserves. Dave talked about this at length, but you know, shifting people to hourly wages, including some managers to hourly wages and pooling tips. We've done it at virtually all of our operations. It has had a significant reduction in labor costs, and it has absolutely reduced turnover in the kitchen. I mean, I'm sure everybody had the same experience that we did last year, that, you know, trying to get line cooks was really, really tough. But we haven't had to hire a line cook in months since we made this change. So there's been an equalization between the pay that the front of the house gets and the back of the house is receiving. And it has improved the culture in the restaurant and has solved some problems for us. So I know there's a lot of questions about tip pooling. I think each restaurant has to figure out for themselves what works for them in terms of how tips get allocated between the jobs. You can, you know, have all sorts of different systems for this. Ours are not the same at every operation. In fact, I think they're different in most operations, taking into account, you know, the idiosyncrasies of each place. But I think the whole world is going to this. You know, there are still states in the United States where the tipped minimum wage is $2.30 an hour or whatever it is, but, you know, it's $9 an hour in Colorado going to 10. Non-tipped minimum wage is $12.85 going up. So, you know, the pooling of tips, I think, is going to become universal in the coming months. So studying it and getting ready to make that change now's the time to do it. And as Dave said, pointed out so accurately, this is the time that you need your communication to be perfect and transparent and get everybody on board. Like Dave, we lost a few key employees over this, which was really, really sad, but we're not going back. The change has been made. The culture is changing, and I think it's pretty much going to be there for everybody soon. So it's probably time to adopt it. Menu engineering, a lot of you have probably done this already, but I'm putting it up nonetheless. You know, focusing on reducing labor is so important. So trying to make good decisions about engineering your menu to not have huge amounts of hours involved in prep, really being careful with making sure you have items that travel well for takeout and delivery to keep your guest happy. You know, consider completely separate menu for takeout or a ghost kitchen concept, as Dave already talked about. Eliminating high food cost items, focusing on the high margin items. And again, menu that can be produced by the smallest possible staff, eliminating items that are prone to waste. This is something we've worked really hard on in our restaurants, and I think everyone should, which is really take advantage of the current law that allows for takeout alcoholic beverage sales. This is a huge add-on, and you should not let any takeout order get out the door without having a chance to include alcoholic beverage sales. We're launching a whole pre-batch cocktail program of canned and bottled alcoholic beverages that are super easy to take out. You can fill growlers. This is a real opportunity that the government has given us, and you'd be remiss if you couldn't find every opportunity to exploit this. Make it a big part of your website, and make it a big part of all of your marketing. Add-on fees. We do not ourselves do a so-called COVID tax. I think people just really sort of object to that. But retail sales fees are something that we collect in a number of locations. A retail sales fee is nothing more than a fee that gets added onto the check that you know, you've got to give a rationale for, and you've got to post it. But at Union Station, we collect a 3% facility maintenance fee that gets added to every check that helps pay for the operation of that facility. They have a similar fee at Larimer Square. Individual restaurants can certainly add on these fees, and you can call them really whatever you want. You should just be transparent with it and make sure that you're using the fee for the stated purpose, and that you put it out there. You can call it, you know, an employee benefits support fee, set that money aside to pay for time off or sick time, but you can add on these fees, and they can, you know, really help your bottom line and give you access to funds you might not otherwise have. A lot of places are adding a 10% fee for takeout to cover the cost of, you know, DoorDash and Grubhub, which is so expensive, and the cost of the packaging and whatnot. I think a lot of restaurants are also having, you know, as you know, have separate menus out there for takeout where the prices are actually higher than they are for dine-in. That's another way to get additional funding. And I know that a lot of restaurants now are going to automatic gratuity, the straight up 20%. There's a bunch of higher end restaurants that are doing that now. You know, make sure that when you do any of these fees that you're doing it pre-tax. You have to collect sales tax on any of these fees. If you do a mandatory gratuity like this 20%, or I know one restaurant is doing 22 or 23%, those, you know, those funds technically belong to the house, and you can use them any way you want to support salaries or whatnot. It's just super important, I think, that you be transparent with, you know, how you're handling, you know, these funds. But, you know, the current environment makes implementing these kinds of things easier than it has been in the past. And these can be valuable tools, I think, in helping you get a little bit more margin during times where your sales volume is undoubtedly lower than it has been historically. You know, I know a lot of restaurants have tried this one, and I think it's got some merit. If you have loyal patrons that really want to support you, consider issuing, you know, these are almost like savings bonds, gift certificates that you sell for $50 or $75 that are worth $100 after March 1st. Gives you money to work with over the course of the winter. You just got to make sure that you're there to honor it. That would obviously be a stain on the industry if people bought gift certificates and weren't able to redeem them. But we have definitely had a lot of our loyal guests approach us and want to buy gift certificates for the purpose of supporting us. Don't be afraid to appeal to your loyal patrons to commit to supporting you by ordering or dining once a week. I mean, they really, a lot of you have loyal guests that want you to be there forever and are willing to support you. Don't be afraid to ask for it. And then lastly, on the takeout stuff, you know, heavily discount some high margin items like these pre-batch cocktails to promote your takeout sales. That, you know, rather than discounting your food, to say, hey, if you add on this pre-batch margarita or cocktail, you know, it's at a deeply discounted price that you can afford because it's got high margin, and it will drive people to takeout. That's it for the quick PowerPoint. I moved through it quickly. We're going to have time for questions and answers. But I did have one last thing to say about, you know, the takeout and delivery that I noticed in a lot of our operations that I would just want to caution everyone is that has turned into a real business. It's not, I'm afraid we treated it a little bit like a temporary sideline, something that, you know, we just sort of catch as catch can in terms of the bartender and the server and maybe a manager, we're all helping out. As it gets colder, I think we can assume that takeout's going to go back up again. Delivery is going to go back up again. I think we need to treat it as a serious business, a separate business, and commit staff to it and really make sure that the takeout and delivery business is not interfering with your dine-in business and diminishing the experience of those guests who are dining in and not creating havoc in the restaurant. So getting serious about the business and how you're going to operate that takeout and delivery business and keep it separate and discrete from your dine-in business and make sure that the two can operate side by side seamlessly. I think it's really important to get that done. So that's it. Hopefully there'll be some questions. I hope that this list that we cobbled together has spurred some ideas for everyone and can help help you get through the winter and through into next year when it gets warm, and hopefully our sales go up again, and we can all hopefully someday look towards getting back to normal. I just want to say, thank you, Dave. Gave me some inspiration and ideas just hearing him talk today. Want to thank the Colorado Restaurant Association, Sonia and Sally Ann and everyone down there for all of your efforts during this. I know we're all appreciative of the support.
Hey, Joe, if you could take your landlord hat off for a second and speak from a tenant standpoint. You mentioned the target cost, that doesn't work at 20%. What should everybody be looking at as a real reasonable occupancy costs? And how have you, I know there's disclosure issues, but I can share in some cases some targets that I've hit for, but what's your take on that?
Well, the rule of thumb that we use is, roughly the maximum should be 10%. And and that 10% would include your base rent and your CAM, CAM. So taxes, maintenance, insurance that the landlord is charging you. In our world, we'd like to see that number be 6%, 7%. But what we find is that if tenants get above 10%, it's just too hard on them. They really struggle with profitability at that point. So, but all in at 10%, yeah, you can get by. You can make money. That is a sustainable occupancy cost. But of course, it varies depending on your volume. If you have a $6 million business, you can actually afford to pay 10% easier than if you have $1 million business. So, it has a little bit of a sliding scale, but that's roughly our sort of our rule of thumb.
And everybody keeping in mind that you've got two sort of metrics that make up your rent number. You've got your base rent, which is price per square foot, and then you've got your triple net costs, which include insurance and common area maintenance. And those numbers, the triple net costs, are really not debatable or negotiable. Those are things that we pay to the landlord, and it's a direct pass-through. The landlord's not making money on that. So when you go and you try to negotiate those prices, you're probably wasting your time. The area to hit on is your base rent, or if you're on a percentage rent, trying to lower that percentage rent, raise that percentage rent marker, that breakpoint number, so that you have to do more sales before you carve off a percentage of your sales. But it's that base rent number that you're trying to get down. If it's 22, you want to get it to 15 and so on, but you're not going to get much flex on the triple net costs.
Yeah, with a number of our tenants where we've negotiated these kinds of deals, what the deal actually looks like is you're going to pay the lesser of your CAM or 10% of your sales. I'm sorry, the greater of that 10% of your sales or your CAM. So you got to at least.
Your tenants all heard you say lesser. Yep. Now you're stuck at lesser.
It's over. But it's the greater of the two. So at least get the CAM in the door to cover expenses. You know, you got to remember landlords have mortgages. They have to pay property taxes. They have to pay insurance. There's no getting away from that. And there's only two places they have to go to get that, which is either the rent that the tenant pays or out of their own personal savings. So, you know, those are the only two sources to cover the expenses of the real estate. So, you know, we're hanging in there with our partners, our tenants, but we do need to at least get enough money in to cover operating expenses.
Well, great. With that, then I think we'll start the Q&A if that's okay. And I would be remiss if I didn't address the tip pooling and the service charge issue. It's something that comes up quite a bit in our association, and I think those are both two of the most frequent questions that we get. So I just want to clarify, and I appreciate, Joe, you putting this on your PowerPoint as a note, that it's really important that you check with your attorney when you're looking at instituting a tip pool. What we hear from our labor law attorneys over and over and over is that you actually don't want to include any managers or supervisors in a tip pool because you could get in trouble very quickly. But that being said, we do have a free legal resource center with Fisher & Phillips Law Firm who can talk about your specific issues and your specific scenario to give you free advice. And because these are usually a very short call, 15 minutes at most, and they can advise you at no cost on making sure that you're taking the least risk and doing things correctly. And yes, you are correct with that service charge as well, Joe. In your note is when it is a service charge and you're not giving an option to the guest to pay that, it is taxable income. It's something that you need to count as taxable income. You can do with it anything you like, but you do need to treat that as regular revenue for your business. So it's important that you, and also when you are doing a tip pool, and there is some signage required by law, it's actually fairly open to what you can put on how you're distributing or that you are pooling those tips. And we're happy to provide that information for you as well. I think that's on our website. To access our legal resource center, you can send an email to info@corestaurant.org, and our staff will get on that and get you a personal introduction to those attorneys that can help you. So with that, I'll start to ask some questions here that people have posted. The first question here is, are you finding that raising debt capital is pretty much non-existent right now? We are trying to refinance an existing SBA loan and the banks don't want to touch restaurants, but we are independent and not as large as your restaurant group.
Yeah, from our standpoint, debt financing is hard to come by right now, and you're going to have to collateralize those loans. So home security, collateralization, or other sources of funds. Banks are scared. Restaurants are high risk. So in our experience, the bank funding is almost non-existent from an availability standpoint. Joe, you're seeing the same thing?
Yeah, borrowing money would be entirely tied to, collateralizing it and demonstrating your ability to pay it back. But, beyond that, I've certainly talked to my lenders, and, they're not really interested in making restaurant loans at this time, even for, development loans to build a shopping center that might be primarily food and beverage. They're just have hit the pause button. I think it'll come back at some point, but yeah, it's extremely challenging right now.
Thank you both. Another question we have here is, what kind of systems / operational issues have you had with the ghost kitchen implementation? And what would you do differently in a setup? We are concerned with those technical hiccups and then managing ghost orders alongside existing menu items.
For us, a lot of the third-party Grubhub, DoorDash, a lot of those, they have a real slick. We have a KDS system in our kitchen, so those orders come in. Guests can pre-order, so they can order at noon for a 5 o'clock pickup, and it allows us to really see the queue, so that at 2 o'clock we can say, "Oh man, at 4:30 we are slammed," and act accordingly. Or, on a slower night, hey, we're not getting the traffic that we normally do. You can go, and we're going to change the pattern. But it's Joe mentioned it as well. You got to really think that out from the standpoint of the packaging, how it interrupts the line, the flow. If you're a finer dining restaurant, all of a sudden you're doing a less sort of intense preparation, how the kitchen reacts to that, or vice versa. You're doing something that's a little more challenging for your kitchen. You got to make sure that flow and that process is really, that the kitchen has a lot of reps under their belt before you go live, or you'll just crash on a busy night.
Yeah, and I'd add that you may want to, if you're going to try a ghost kitchen thing, maybe start small by doing something that has like a one-time pickup. Like you order this and pickup is between 5 or 6, and you've got to order by some predetermined time so that everything can be made in advance. You can control the flow of it, and it all happens in a time when you're able to manage either the delivery or the pickups happening. One of our operations is doing a little barbecue, ghost kitchen. Barbecue's great. It travels well. Guests can order the stuff up to 24 hours in advance, and then there's a specific pickup time, and that has helped it not interfere with normal service during the course of the evening.
The pre-order model really helps. We've had some great success with Jack's doing pop-up deals on Saturday. You have to order by Wednesday. It's been quite popular, so we know exactly what to order. The guest comes, it's in a bag, it's got their name on it. We get to double check that everything's correct. The pickup time is between 12 and noon. We can run out to the sidewalk, shove it in their back door with lots of booze, as Joe said, take the advantage of that opportunity, and it really is great. When it's nightly and it's live and it's hot, it's a lot harder to figure out. But when it's challenged, when it's a pre-order, it's a much simpler thing to do.
Great, thank you. Next question, how did you dole out cleaning responsibilities to your staff so that it felt fair and you got buy-in from the team regarding tip pooling? Who gets to be a part of your tip pool, and is it divided by hours worked?
Great question. Certainly something that was really challenging for us until we figured it out, or at least got closer. It's still a work in progress, but you really have to take all the jobs and dole them out appropriately, evenly, and put a lot of thought into that, so that it feels equitable and it feels like everyone is pulling their weight. In the case of the tip pooling, the front of the house is making less money. Are you asking enough of the kitchen, who is now making a little more money, to let that feel equitable and fair? And so, we reintroduced employee meal in some cases. We've emphasized, in particular with direct meetings with the kitchen staff, what this means to the floor staff, and what their role is, what the heart of the house role is, to get buy-in from the front of the house, that the back of the house understands what has happened and what this shift in distribution looks like. So really important that gets looked at really carefully, so that everybody feels as though they're being asked equally amounts, and the jobs change, and sometimes it's front of the house, sometimes it's back of the house, and that's an ongoing challenge. But yes, that needs to be looked at really, really carefully. You're on mute. So.
Sorry, Joe, is there anything you'd like to
We've done similar, and just sort of met with the whole team and asked them their, you know, their thoughts on it to get buy-in. In other words, made them part of the solution for it. We haven't shifted entirely to in-house janitorial at this point. There are some restaurants where the floor care is just too complicated. Probably have the staff do it, but they're doing everything else at this point. And it was really just a matter of pulling front of house, back of the house together and say, how do you all want to do this? So that rather than imposing a solution on them, we asked them to, you know, to come up with the plan that they wanted to use.
Great. And while we're on the subject, somebody's asking, are you paying tips out with bi-weekly paychecks or take-home cash nightly?
We pay weekly, and it all goes onto the paycheck. We started that years ago. So we do not distribute cash tips.
We, it was different for, in depending on the restaurant, but we has switched. I think we switched in probably April or May to all cash tips, all credit card tips, everything goes into the bank. And then comes on the paycheck that the staff gets every 2 weeks.
And that's a little squirrely at first because we all, for the beginning of time, worked in restaurants to have cash on a nightly basis. It took a minute for people to get comfortable with it, but we have had just universal appreciation and so many responses of thanks for doing that. I know I was bitching about it at first, but I'm now actually saving money. I find that I'm not in the same introduction that when we stopped allowing alcohol consumption in any of the restaurants. There's no shift drinks. There's no after, you know, a tough shift, shot in a beer. And that's why I started working in the restaurant business, was a free shot at the end of the night. That doesn't happen anymore. And that people are like, thanks, man. I was hanging out in bars 5-6 nights a week because I started getting a buzz on at work, and then it carried over into the rest of the night, and I had cash in my pocket, and I ended up spending more money than I wanted to. Now that I'm not drinking at work and I get paid once a week, I'm running, I'm healthier, and I got more money. So it's a little bit of a change, but you know, we're helping people live bigger, better lives. And in the end, at least for us, the appreciation has been expressed.
Okay, one last question. Where do operating expenses fall when considering prime operating costs?
So what we call prime operating costs are your cost of goods sold. So your food cost, your liquor cost, and your labor cost. Those two numbers together are your prime costs. Those are, you know, those are numbers that are pretty easy for you to track on a daily basis. You know what, you obviously know what your purchases are every day. You know what your labor cost is every day, and you can track those with the expectation that you're going to try and keep your prime costs below 60% of your sales. I mean, using rough math, if your labor cost is 32% and your cost of goods sold is 28%, you know, you're at 60%. It's important to track those prime costs because those are what help you make a decision about whether or not a shift is worth, you know, a night is worth being open, a day is worth being open. If the staffing requirements of opening your restaurant require that you run a labor cost of, you know, 50% or 45%, and then you add your cost of goods sold to that, you know, you're up into 70-80%. It probably doesn't make sense to operate. But generally speaking, you know, our team is watching those two numbers like a hawk and trying to keep them, you know, down into the 50s every single day.
Same for us. And when those numbers do get into the 50s, when you push between 55 and 50, that's when you really start to perform really, really well. So those are those variables that all of us face: liquor, labor, and food cost. Liquor being the least one because it's our universally lowest cost. food cost being the next challenge, but labor cost is the one that is really going to make or break the difference. And when you can pin that at 55, you're going to do well. When you can get that down towards 50, and that prime cost is in that 51, 52 range, you're having some of the best months of your career. Like you're banking cash. And that's where you need to really focus any way you can. And Joe touched on it with menu engineering, really evaluating your food costs, really evaluating the whole metrics of how you're prepping your food and you're handling your food and how you're purchasing, and doing some really intelligent liquor programs that really maximize your liquor profits. But labor's the killer. Labor's the one that really drags us all down when we're like, God, and every hour counts, and every and budgeting your schedules, and we're going to do X amount of sales this week. Here's our schedule. Wow, we're already at a 44% labor cost, and we haven't it's Monday morning. We haven't done anything yet. So really, really getting forensically myopic with each hour, each day, and how to save on that labor cost. And at the same time, not having a guest walk in and there's no host because the manager's working the door, but the manager's back dealing with a gift certificate. We're down one busser, we need 3. There's a trade-off, and you sacrifice quality of experience. You ran a great labor cost for the week, but the guests had, all of a sudden you're getting 2-star Yelp reviews all week because you blew it.
Yeah, and I'll take this opportunity to throw out one labor-saving device that we're studying right now. We have not implemented this anywhere yet, but I have seen it done in some restaurants in some other cities, and that is shifting the way that you run the floor. I mean, traditionally, we're running the floor with, servers that are running 4 to 6 table stations, something like that. I don't know what day would you use in your restaurants, but that's typically what you'd see. The server's responsible for, their station in terms of, ordering drinks, serving the drinks, picking up food. This model would sort of shifts that, and it's dependent upon handhelds. I think, all the technology is obviously way, way better on those than it was a few years ago. The Toast handhelds that we're using in a few of the restaurants are really fantastic. And under this model, you change the stations to be much, much larger, and you have specialization. So the server or the service manager or the lead, whatever you want to call them, they might be operating a station that's as big as 12 tables, but they don't do anything except take orders. So they've got their handheld. They never need to leave the dining room. They never have to step off the floor. They just take orders, and then everything that's ordered gets brought to the table either by a food runner or a drink runner. Kitchen loves it because there's fewer people in the kitchen. The bar is instead of dealing with 8 servers, they're dealing with 2 runners, and you can typically reduce your floor staff by about 20% or something like that. So there's some different systems out there that now is the time. I think that we've got the opportunity to study and implement some of these. This is one we're gonna take a test run on in one of our restaurants and see how well it works. But the way we mapped it out, it would reduce front of house labor by about 20%, just because people are specialized and they're not taking as many steps. Server could just stay there with the handheld, basically never leave the floor. They don't need to run to a terminal. They're not running to the bar. They're not running to the kitchen. They just stay on the floor with the idea that they can also generate additional sales because they're never leaving. Their sole job is to get the order.
And those handhelds exist in a lot of those POS. Aloha has a good one. We use Toast. Big fan of Toast. That handheld model, when correctly used, you're at a large table, which sometimes takes a lot of attention from a server. So he or she has a table of 8 or 10, not necessarily in this period of our lives, but on a bigger table, they're taking a drink order to start with, then they roll right into the food order. And before they've even left the table, the first round of drinks has hit the table. The guest is impressed because the server's still there, and all of a sudden they've got beers and cocktails in front of them. And then you have the opportunity to have that full second round of drinks be sold because you've gotten those drinks to the server in a really, really expedited amount of time, as opposed to the server going back to the terminal, putting all the drinks in, coming back to the table. It's just, they're really efficient. They're not cheap. It's an added cost at a time when a lot of us don't have money to spend on those things, but the ROI on those handhelds used efficiently and intelligently is really, really strong. It's great. It's tough to teach the server to be fluid. You know, we've all sat at the grocery store when somebody can really work that cash register and run all those things through, so that it's not a server sitting there staring at a screen, which then eliminates the hospitality element that we're all trying to put. But it's something that we teach. Hey, Joe, I saw a squirrel, what looked like a chipmunk, just run underneath your door behind you.
It's probably my accountant's hamster.
No, for real. It looked like a chipmunk ran under your door.
My accountant does have a hamster.
Yeah, well, I think it's out.
So do the two of you have time for two real quick last questions? We've got two more that have come in.
Yeah.
The first one is, you were using gross pay for labor costs, correct? Pay, benefits, taxes, etc.
What was that? Using what?
Gross pay for labor costs. Pay, benefits, taxes, etc. That's the question.
Yes.
Okay. And then the second question is, we are appealing with the city on property taxes pretty heavily, and did that back in March, right after the shutdown. The landlord has been very hands-off in this effort. Have you guys attempted this? And if so, have you been successful? As that will have a real impact on CAM/rent. Just wondering if you're seeing the city shift a little on property taxes given the climate.
I got into it with the city of Boulder, which was just challenging on property tax and on sales tax. We were delinquent for half of March, April, and they came at us looking for penalties and fines and this and that, and was able to show them the sort of incredibly inequitable nature of profiting off of anyone in this time. But we have not had any luck in getting them abated. We got a little bit of a payment plan relief, but no abatement at all in any way. Joe's more of a gangster than I am, so maybe he had more luck with that.
No, we just paid.
Yeah.
Didn't even attempt. That's one area where we did not attempt to get any flexibility.
Okay, two more questions came in. Folks, these are the last two because we want to be respectful of everybody's time. What are the benefits that you provide to managers? Medical, dental, meals, parking? And have you reduced any of those benefits?
We haven't reduced those. We provide a contribution to the medical and then compensate the salary when we made that switch. Now it's just part of that. We don't pay 100% of insurance, but we've got other benefits and profit sharing and other things that we look to make up that expense. In the cases where we have parking challenges, we pay for parking. Sometimes we will assist in a cell phone compensation or a little gas. A lot of different things make up benefits.
Yeah, we made the decision to provide our managers with full benefits, so they get medical and dental, which we pay 75% of the premium. They get vacation. We have a 401k plan. This is a decision that that we made as a company some time ago to provide to our managers. But I would say along with that, our managers understand that they have to manage labor costs, including their own. And so the only way that we can provide that level of benefits is for the management team to control their labor. And, so that may mean that their base salary might be a little bit lower than maybe somebody else's without benefit. But the point of it is that, they have to manage labor, and labor is an all-inclusive number, including their cost and the cost of their benefits. So we like to look at just look at it holistically and put the burden of you know, hitting the right numbers on the team, so that, you know, they're essentially earning their benefits. I hope that makes sense.
Very last question. What about slamming the kitchen with delivery apps, online ordering, and in-house? How do you control that?
Well, you can turn those things on and off when you do get slammed. You can turn DoorDash off and the other delivery apps until you can catch back up. But that goes back to getting your reps down and getting your kitchen staff and your kitchen crew collectively under the understanding that these are really challenging times and we need to maximize our revenue. So let's up our game and figure out how to do it. Let's not create a menu that we can't execute, but let's be willing to do $1,000 or $1,500 more in sales on a given night or more through to go and delivery than we normally do, because it's really important now. Everybody is in it to win it, and we're going to get through this winter, and this is how we're going to do it. We're going to do it by everybody's in the delivery game. That's not going away. And gosh, why didn't we figure this out before? But it's something that everybody's got to figure out, and yeah, you can turn that on and off when you do get slammed. There are times when it's crazy. You're on the line, and all of a sudden your screen blows up, and 70% of it is to go. And you're just like, where did this come from? I did not see these people walk in the front door.
Right, but this is business that you want to get, and what we're attempting to do at all of our operations is to get organized and to think about our business differently. We are in the takeout business, we are in the delivery business, we're in the dine-in business, and it's all happening together, and we have to have systems and procedures and staffing in place to do that. Cannot treat takeout and delivery as though it's some temporary sideline that you just have to deal with. It's a real business, which means that you've got to have a plan for how you're going to execute it. And it may be, you know, everything from menu engineering to putting separate staff in place to deal with it. But the point is to take it seriously and to treat it like a real business and try and grab every dollar that you can. That said, look, we cannot take unlimited to go and takeout orders at 7 o'clock on a Friday with all of our dine-in with the extended patio. So part of your plan has to be, how are you going to manage that? You know, there may be certain times that you just can't as Dave said, you got to turn it off. But what you really want to do is to be training your guests to make their orders at different times, not during the peak, not during the peak period. So
I mean, you can run promos and
got to organize it.
Do DoorDash promos or whoever you're using for from 8 to 9 at night, or do happy hours, or certain nights of the week. Like you can work with those. You're in control of how that plays, and when you slam your kitchen.
And what portion of your menu is available for takeout. We do not have 100% of our menu available for takeout at any of our operations.
And some things shouldn't go. Some dishes that you built on your menu are designed and built and cooked and crafted and plated to be eaten in person, live and delicious and hot and fresh. And to try to put that in a box and have it eaten a half an hour later sometimes works to all of our disadvantage. So in the same way, we don't have everything available on the to-go menus.
Well, listen, I really appreciate you both staying on longer than anticipated. Thank you for your time today. Listen to all of you out there. Hang in there. We're doing everything we can to try to help however we can. We're always open to additional suggestions. You can email us at info@corestaurant.org, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you all on future educational programs. Thank you so much. Have a great day, gentlemen. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Good luck, everyone.
Yeah, stay in it.